Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. We are here to share a little bit more information with you virtually. To those of you tuning in now, thank you for joining us. And to those of you who may watch later, we appreciate you being willing to spend a few minutes with us to learn a little bit more about the Fayetteville Forward Bond Package. What that means and what it is for our city. So we'll go over some of the education highlights and make sure you understand what is included and what that means and the technical aspects of that, and then give certainly an opportunity for us to answer any questions that we've asked along the way, and make sure you have all your questions answered. Our goal here at the city is to inform and educate our residents so you can make the best choice possible as you're considering what to vote for this November. So the Fayetteville Forward Bond Package is a proposal by the city to issue up to $97 million in general obligation bonds. This will come in 3 distinct and separate questions that will cover a variety of areas. All of those, while separate questions, directly relate to one another because they address needs that have been identified in safety and security and economic development that we believe will transform our city and really move us forward in a positive direction. So those 3 questions contain needs that have been identified. These needs did not come about overnight. They have been long identified in many cases through our capital improvement plans, by priorities that have been identified by council and staff and past councils and current councils. But really importantly, they've been identified by our residents. When we do the citizen survey and the resident engagement survey, the top priorities that our residents in the city of Fayetteville indicate they would like for us to invest in are safety, security, streets, sidewalks, and economic development. So this is the city's proposal to address those needs and to meet the desire of the residents. It is one way we can do that. We estimate that by going this route with general obligation bonds, it could save the city up to $2.5 million over other methods of addressing these needs. But importantly, it would accelerate our ability to do so and get those things to our city now. So I'll cover briefly the 3 different bond questions. I have some guests with me here tonight. I've got Deputy Chief Alvarez from the Fayetteville Fire Department, who could talk a little bit about the public safety. And of course, Council Member representing District 3, Mario Benavente, who will share with us in a little bit his perspective on the bonds and be able to certainly answer any questions should they arise. So let's start off with public safety. That's $60 million. Now, I said this earlier, I want to reiterate it one more time. These 3 questions on the ballot are independent questions. They can be answered yes or no in any combination. And so residents can decide for themselves for each question what's right for them or what they believe they would like the city to do. So the first question is public safety. This would issue $60 million in general obligation bonds that covers a variety of improvements that relate to police and fire needs. And I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Alvarez and let him talk just a little bit about that, what that would mean and what those projects are.
Thank you and good evening. Part of the bond package is $60 million slated for public safety. What this, if approved, it will put in place possible consideration for upfitting some of our fire stations, some of our facilities. Haymont Fire Station number 2 was built back in 1941. So for example, Fire Station 16, which is located on Cedar Creek Road, Fire Station 9, which is at Santa Fe. Again, Fire Station 7, which is located on Stacy Weaver Drive, as well as Fire Station 3 and so on. A lot of our fire stations are in need of major maintenance and overhaul to make them more ADA compliant for our public, as well as upfitting them with community rooms and things of that nature that we're seeing in some of our newer facilities. With that said, there's other things on the bond referendum that will also enhance our response to the community. So with that said, I'll turn the floor back over to Ms. Jody Phelps. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. One of the other big projects that is included in the public safety 60 million would be the 911 communications center. If you are unaware, the 911 communications center is currently located on the second floor of City Hall. It has been there for approximately 30 years. And so one of those projects would be to provide a space and a center that accommodates our growth as a city and allows our communications operators, who are often the first point of contact for public safety and first responders, a space to grow and grow with our city and to be able to provide that critical service and that critical connection when we all need those resources most. So that covers public safety. The second question is public infrastructure. This would be $25 million, and this would go towards our streets, sidewalks, and connectivity investments. Those would be $14.7 million in street resurfacing. The city does has a comprehensive street repavement plan. This investment would accelerate our ability to address those needs. Annually, the city spends about $4.7 million Powell bill funding on resurfacing of our city streets. And so this would really be able to drive some of those plans forward in a positive way and allow us to get to more streets more quickly than we would be able to otherwise. There's also about $7.3 million included for sidewalks throughout the city. In 2018, the city did complete a sidewalk study, a pedestrian plan that identifies the areas in the city that are most in need for additional sidewalks and sidewalk improvements. We would prioritize in that areas where there are sidewalk gaps, so we can really focus on that connectivity of our city. We have sidewalks that go to a certain point and then pick up a ways down the road. We want to connect those two areas and make it more walkable. And of course, that makes it more safe. Importantly, we have areas around the city where that might occur near or around a school. So we would want to prioritize the safety of those families and children around that school. There is also roughly $800,000 for intersection improvements included in public infrastructure, and that is crosswalks and ability to create safe intersections where we have sidewalks to really connect our street. We want to connect streets across from one another. And finally, we have roughly $450,000 that would be available to establish and create bike lanes to make Fayetteville more bikeable, not only more pedestrian friendly, but more bikeable as well. That is, of course, another mode of transportation for our residents to use and to use safely. So that is public infrastructure. This is $25 million for public infrastructure. The third question on the ballot is housing opportunity, and that would be $12 million. This came about with an identified need in housing in our area. I think we all know that there is a need for housing in the Fayetteville market, and council has decided that they would like to consider doing something about that. So there are three main activities that this would cover. The first would be encouraging new development in the community of either single family or multifamily homes. The second would be rehabilitation or revitalization of neighborhoods. Importantly, this creates naturally occurring affordable housing, allowing families and individuals to age in place. And the third would be to support our homeownership programs. This creates equity and economic stability of families in the community as we look at moving families from renting to owning their home. This is importantly where you have families who are able to pay rent and are working, are really vital parts of our economy and our community. And to get to that down payment and be able to be a homeowner is certainly some help would be needed. And so we want to get families along into that. That all would be covered in the $12 million for the housing opportunity and really help to meet the need in our community. This sounds wonderful. Of course, I would like for everyone to, if they have not already engaged in early voting, to go download a sample of your ballot, so you can see the exact ballot language that you will see. It is a lengthy paragraph. The important part about that is the city is very specific in what they are asking for. So the long paragraph there allows us to tell you in detail out exactly what we would use the funding for, should it be approved. And by statute, we're not allowed to use that funding for anything outside of what we have asked for on the ballot. So all of that, $97 million sounds great. It does, of course, come at a cost. We estimate that should all three of the bonds pass, it would come with a modest property tax increase of about 4 cents per $100 valuation, and that would not take effect before 2024. This means that for every $100,000 in property value, it would be an annual increase of property tax of about $40. $200,000 in property value would be $80, and so forth and so on. So that is those are the bonds in a nutshell. Before we go on, I'm gonna turn it over to Councilmember Benavente and allow him to share a few words.
Thank you, Ms. Jody. I took that advice that you just gave all of our viewers, current and in the future, who watch this webinar. Just go out and vote. Early voting has begun. I went and took care of it myself already, and I said yes to all three of these bonds. And I know I encouraged all my friends and family to do the same, because it was said at the beginning of the webinar, and bears repeating, all three of them really do sort of coincide with one another. We know that we want Fayetteville to continue to grow, and the way we do that is by making us just a viable option for all the folks that are coming in out of Fort Bragg, all the folks that have been growing up here and are ready to buy their own home here. And they want to do that in a safe neighborhood. So the public safety bonds make total sense. I think those are going to go through with flying colors. The infrastructure bonds, once you decide that, hey, Fayetteville's a place for me, I want some green spaces. I want some sidewalks. I want to be able to get around and have a great time while I'm here. That's exactly what we're looking at. And we've certainly made huge strides over the years. And we've got these, wonderful master plans that if anyone is curious about, hey, when is it coming to my neighborhood? You can go online to our website and see where you are. The best thing about the infrastructure bond is that if that one passes, we're going to get to your neighborhood that much quicker. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that go through. And then thirdly, the housing opportunities. We know that the market is rough out there. And a lot of folks are really ready to take the plunge and put a down payment on their first homes. And we want that for people in Fayetteville. And even more so, folks that are looking to stick around, our longtime residents. It's really important that they don't feel pressured to, sort of move out of the area. We want them to age in place. And that includes improving some things for the neighborhood. I think one of the most exciting things that we had in my district was the Tiffany Pines neighborhood getting a brand new neighborhood sign. The old one was kind of weathered and worn, for all the years it's been up. It was a beautiful sign, but we got a brand new one now through a project that the city had available for any neighborhood to take advantage of to help beautify their community so that folks can take pride in where they live and want to stick around. That's the exact kind of programming that's going to have that much more money available for neighborhoods if we pass that housing opportunity, in addition to a lot of the down payment stuff that I think is also going to be great for first-time home buyers. So I just want to encourage everyone to ask those questions. Ask your city council member, how is it going to impact my neighborhood? We'll be glad to take time to explain and share with you all the great things we're going to see. I think one of the most encouraging things I've heard throughout these many town halls or information sessions that we've been having in person. I know that Ms. Jody and Chief Alvarez, they've done probably twice as many as I have, so they can say even more. But from the dozen or so that I was a part of, a lot of folks would bring up the fact that, hey, I remember when we had the last bond request, and some folks were skeptical of that. But once they started seeing all the splash pads go up, once they started to see all the great senior centers come together, we just did the ribbon cutting for the senior center, for the Grill Crisp Senior Center. It's got a beautiful pool. All of these, they've seen the return on investment. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. And so this time around, they're like, hey, I've seen what happens when we say yes to this. We start to see development, we start to see wonderful things. So I want to see that again. And so they're saying to us, when we give this information, we're going to vote yes. So we want to get to everyone, or as many folks as we can, to get to that place. So please ask away any questions so that we can make sure that we're voting yes on all three of these bonds this November.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your participation and being willingness to jump on this evening. Thank you very much for that. So I want to cover a couple questions that we've received and questions that we get quite frequently. The first of which is, and one of my favorites, is my street going to be repaved with this bond? And I will just say this to all of the listeners and residents, that every city street, the city maintains 756 miles of streets in the city of Fayetteville. There are consequently 1,194 miles of streets, and some of those are maintained by North Carolina Department of Transportation or otherwise. But every one of the 756 miles of city streets is on a list for pavement preservation or repavement. We've recently done a pavement conditioning survey that graded and evaluated every one of those streets. So there is a cycle for repavement. Your street is on the list. If you are interested in understanding and knowing where your street is on the list, feel free to call the city. We'll be glad to tell you and talk to you and explain to you exactly what the score and condition of your street is and when and where we are in that. Should these bonds pass and we are able to bring the $14.7 million in funding in to add to the 4.7 we typically spend every year, it would really accelerate our ability to get to more streets more quickly than we would otherwise be able to. So where you're talking about, if your street is not necessarily on the list for a bond project, we would be able to get to that much, much faster than we would otherwise should these bonds be approved. But if you want to know where your street is, we'd be more than happy to tell you and talk to you about that. Another question we get frequently is, why aren't there specific costs associated with some of these projects? And there are many costs associated with them. I went through several of them in the public infrastructure section, where we know what we typically spend and how much we could allocate towards that. Some of the larger construction costs, like fire stations and 911 center, we have estimated costs associated with those listed on the website. It's fayetteville.nc.gov/bond. You can see there where we have been transparent about the $182 million of needs that have been identified in our public safety sector. We know that if this passes, 60 million is certainly not going to accomplish all of those, but council will prioritize with the input of staff what's most important to get to first. And the other projects that don't get funded with bond funding would still remain a priority. And we would be able to address those at some point in time. A big question that we get asked a lot is, what happens if the bonds don't pass? Well, the short answer to that is these projects will continue to remain a priority and they will not go away. And the city is going to continue to prioritize resurfacing streets and building sidewalks and addressing our public safety needs and, of course, the housing needs in our community. The alternative to this, general obligation bonds, are typically the lowest cost, most effective way for a municipality to borrow money and to be able to accomplish projects like this. It has the lowest cost associated with it in the short term and the long term. So that's typically the reason why we go towards that route to begin with. But there are other ways, and it would take more time and it would have to stretch out while cost could continue to escalate. So we would not be able to address these projects as quickly as possible while the cost would continue to rise, and it would take a lot longer for us. A question that has come in, what about schools that were proposed to be built? Schools are part of the Cumberland County School District, and so I would encourage the city does not have plans to build schools because that's not within our purview, but certainly reach out to the school district and the school system and the county to address those questions. And I think that looks like all of the questions. I'm going to ask if we have Deputy Chief Alvarez or Councilmember Benavente, if you have any final parting thoughts.
I like what you said a moment ago, Ms. Jody, about, these needs that we have when it comes to the buildings that we need for our police and for our fire stations, the fact that we got to repave roads and put in sidewalks, the fact that we have, a 20,000 unit shortage in this community when it comes to housing, those are all needs that are going to be with us until we resolve them. And the other way that we could put this phrase is, yesterday's price is not today's price. You hear that a lot of times when entrepreneurs are negotiating and doing better and better over time. I think about that phrase in the terms of, I want as many shovel and ground ready projects ready to go today, so that we're not worried about rising costs and inflation as it relates to these materials and building costs. We budgeted a lot of these things based on what we can get them for now. And I shudder to think, 6, 7, 8 years from now, how much these same projects are going to cost if we delay progress on them. So if we know that we need these things, I like to get them for cheaper by doing them sooner. So that's another big part of this that's really exciting to think about. I know that for the schools, a lot of my constituents, especially in District 3, we want E. Smith to have a brand new, beautiful building. And I know right now, we're still waiting on the county to kind of get everything together. So join in with me and we can go talk to the commissioners together on that question. But when we talk about, the people who are currently living in that district are, and are hoping to own their own homes so they can continue in the meantime to support each other in that community. These are the kinds of projects that the bond can help those folks, stay in place, come to own their own homes, and just be able to do more to support our local school system, even if the county commissioners aren't, jumping on this as quickly as we'd like them to. We can do something in the meantime. So I thought that was worth mentioning. It is out of our purview, but we can still do a lot together as a community.
Thank you, sir. Excellent point. So if there's anyone who's going to tune in after, not watching live, and you have questions, we certainly want you to ask them. If we missed anything, we would be more than happy to answer them offline. We have lots of resources available if you'd like to learn more at fayetteville.nc.gov/bond. I know we did not cover everything this evening, but we have plenty of videos in both English and Spanish available. We have lots of FAQs and lots of information with more specifics about each one of these projects. If you have questions, we have a link on there to the Bond Engage Hub, where you can go and you can fill out our survey, where you tell us what you would spend the money in and where you would prioritize these funds, and participate also in the budgeting process by building your own budget. That information is going to be really important if these pass, and we provide that information to council so they understand the thoughts and the sentiment of residents as we look at these projects. There's also an opportunity on there for you to ask your questions and submit them, but you can always reach out to us at the city by email or call. We would be more than happy to answer any one of those questions. We just appreciate you all being willing to take a few moments tonight to listen. We will be happy to do another one of these in the weeks ahead, do several more of these in the weeks ahead to catch more folks. So please let your friends and neighbors know. And we just appreciate you tuning in. So with that, we will tell you to have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to hearing from you soon and talking to you again soon. Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Benavente and Deputy Chief Alvarez.